What's up, Rave fam? It's Joe, the Rave Tour Guide, and welcome to another episode of the Rave Life Transformation. In today's episode, I want to talk to you a little bit about the high performance habits. Now, the high performance habits have been part of my life since about 2018. I make sure to practice them every day, and I make sure to give each one of these habits some of my attention to make sure that, I'm actually practicing them or striving to practice them on a regular basis. And you should know I wasn't always practicing high performance habits. I wasn't always practicing positive mindsets or positive self talk. I wasn't always someone who was self aware, right? I wasn't super confident about who I was and what my strengths were, of course, as much as I am today. And, there was this period where I really was just living. And trust me, there's nothing wrong with just living, but I felt like I was wanting more, right? That what I was doing just wasn't gonna cut it and it wasn't enough for me. After college is when I really started to hit my stride. And it's when I really started to give my personal development the attention that I felt like it needed, that it wasn't getting in my college years. And so that was really when I saw a real big pivot in my life. Right, I graduated in 2017. I started working. I entered into my first GM position. So I was hitting it. I was working 45, 50 plus hours a week, having to start being the manager of a restaurant as opposed to just being a server, just being a shift lead or a shift supervisor. And I got really caught up in the work because, that's what I thought you should do. Right after college, you just get into work. Got to pay your college tuition. You got to pay your bills. Time to join the adult world, right? Once you finish college. And so I did. It was hard for me because I was just feeling burnt out so quickly, right? And I think it had a lot to do with the place I was working and the environment I was in and the job I was working. It was very physically demanding. And the particular role that I was in was pretty demanding. So I knew there was something missing there, right? I finished college, I'm starting to work, but I still feel like something was missing. How this all happened and how I found high performance was very serendipitous, as you might say. So Monica was working at, or Mrs. Tour Guide was working at a resort here in San Diego called Rancho Valencia. And, she comes home from work one day and she starts talking to me about, the people that she gets to see. Usually there's celebrities or, high profile people who are staying at the resort. And this time she was like, hey, there was this personal development guru who was um, at my resort today, and he was like talking to people. He was super nice. He was telling people about his book that he had written, and she was sharing it with me. And I was like, oh, well, I'm curious. Like, could use some personal development right now. I was, at the time, I was, trying to find something to attach onto that would help me grow. I was doing different journals that I would find at like Barnes and Nobles with, journaling prompts in there, but that just, I wasn't consistent. I wasn't really motivated to do it. I would buy the book, but then like only do the first few pages and then that was it. But this time, Monica tells me about this guy that comes in, and his name was Brendon Burchard. And, I was intrigued. I was like, okay, well, what's this guy all about? And so I looked him up, and I found his book. The first book I found from Brendon Burchard was the book on the high performance habits, right? And so I bought it, and I started to read it, and I can safely say 6 years later, that book changed my life. I got it basically when I was in my late 20s, just after I finished college. So I'm entering in this new era of adulthood, as you might say. And this might be at different times in your life, but this is when it happened for me on my journey. So I want to, tell you a little bit about him. So Brendon Burchard, he's the founder of the High Performance Institute, and the High Performance Institute was responsible for creating and finding the high, well, not creating, but finding the high performance habits, right? They did a lot of studies to determine the top habits that actually led leads to our success, right? Of course, there were a lot of different habits, but they distilled it down to 6 habits. And I started to study them, I started to practice them, I started to embody them, and I started to feel completely different. My life started to change in a way where I feel like I was starting to grow because I was growing with more intention. I was growing with more purpose. I was growing with more direction. I was also growing in multiple areas of my life because I was able to see those areas and take into consideration these areas because I was actually thinking about them. And when I started to give all these different areas attention, I started to focus on the habits, I started to create better routines, I started to see improvements in all my life, in my career, in my relationships with Monica, um, in my friendships, in my familial relationships with my family. Like all these things started to improve because I was giving them the attention that they needed that I don't think I was giving them when I was in my college era. Really start to embody again my rave life again too, because 2018 was the year we went back to EDC, and I started to embrace that part of me, that raver part of me, because I knew and I was very clear that that was a part of who I was, and I was not gonna let that fade away anymore. Like I knew that if I embodied what it meant to be a raver and had the clarity as to who I was, that I could be more fulfilled, and I did become more fulfilled. Also started to embrace some negative habits. Some negative habits started to take over my life and kind of um, make me out of control. My behavior, my actions started to get out of control, and as I was drinking too much, right? I started working in a full service restaurant with a full bar, lots of whiskey, and trust me, I love Japanese whiskey. It's my favorite, but that doesn't mean I ought to be drinking it anymore. But I was having fun. I was living. I was working. I was connecting. I was vibing with my peoples. I was in the industry. I was in it. And I got too deep. And in 2020, just before the pandemic, I had to get sober. I had my last drink. And so in March of 2020, weeks before the pandemic hit, well, I think, no, this happened in February, about, yeah, weeks before the pandemic hit, I had my last drink, and it was a terrible experience for my family, for me. And, long story short, I got sober for 4 years, 2020, 2024, today, still sober, still not drinking. And that too is part of the journey, right? When I stopped drinking and the work that I did in 2020 during the pandemic, mind you, to get sober was also part of my journey. And the high performance really helped me through that, right? The high performance habits, helped me stay sober, but also the programs helped me stay sober. So it's definitely not all just high performance, but it's the growth part, right? Part of my growth and my journey includes, personal development, includes high performance, it includes my sobriety and getting sober. And it leads me up to today where I'm still growing. I'm still striving. I'm still practicing the high performance habits. I'm still practicing the positive mindset, the positive self talk. I'm journaling, we're meditating, we're doing all the things because, as some of you may know who are out there, who are striving, and who are here today to get more in their personal development, that personal development never stops. Growth never stops. We're always striving. And that's why it might seem like every day we got to get after it, because that's what growth is. Growth is getting after it every day and striving. And so that leads me up to where I am today. And, today we're making moves. Today we have clear direction. We have clear purpose. Today we have fulfillment. I have joy. I have abundance. I have clarity. That's where I am today. That's where my journey is and leads me up to today. Um, and so what I want to do now is I want to tell you a little bit about those high performance habits and why they're important, and how I use them, practice them in my life to be happier, to be more fulfilled, to have better intention, to have better productivity, purpose, all these things that a lot of us might need.